There's a moment just before the world goes quiet when the pulse of old-school power still echoes like thunder across an open highway. It's the sound of rebellion against conformity, the last breath of raw mechanical soul before everything turns digital. You can almost smell the superheated rubber, feel the tremor of pistons, sense the defiance in every rev. This isn't nostalgia. It's a snapshot of transition, when fuel and fire gave way to current and code. The story ahead isn't just about a car. It's about a cultural fault line, a symbol of what America once demanded from its machines, and what it's willing to let go of now. Before we move into that silence, we'll revisit the final chapter of Unfiltered Horsepower, the legend that refused to downshift until the very end. Stick around, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment on which icon we should uncover next. The Dodge Challenger Hellcat Redeye didn't just arrive, it erupted into existence. From the moment Dodge unveiled this supercharged brute, it was clear the company wasn't chasing subtlety or restraint. The Redeye was engineered to be a statement, one born from a uniquely American philosophy that prized visceral emotion over perfect efficiency. Beneath its long, squared-off hood sat a 6.2-liter Hemi V8 force-fed by a massive supercharger, delivering nearly 800 horsepower to the rear wheels. That number alone defined its mission: to create the most outrageous version of the classic Challenger, a car that would carry Detroit's muscle legacy into the 21st century without compromise. Dodge built the Hellcat Redeye on the bones of nostalgia. The Challenger's retro-inspired design already evoked the golden age of American muscle, but the Redeye took that spirit and turned it into a modern weapon. The designers wanted the car to feel timeless yet terrifying. It had to honor the late 1960s heritage without becoming a museum piece. To pull this off, Dodge didn't start from scratch. The company leveraged its aging but proven LX platform, a chassis rooted in early 2000s Mercedes-Benz architecture, and reinforced it for one last stand against technological obsolescence. That decision was both bold and practical. It allowed Dodge to pour resources into powertrain development rather than an all-new frame, keeping the price within reach of die-hard enthusiasts. Inside, the Redeye felt like an unapologetic blend of old and new. Analog gauges met digital screens, leather met Alcantara, and everywhere you looked, the car whispered that it was built for drivers who still believed in internal combustion as an art form. Owners didn't buy it for status. They bought it to feel something primal every time they pressed the start button. You could sense that Dodge's engineers knew the world was changing. Electrification was looming, emissions regulations were tightening, and the global shift toward sustainability was accelerating. Yet instead of bowing out quietly, they built a machine that doubled down on everything people loved about muscle cars: absurd power, rear-wheel drive, and a soundtrack that made glass vibrate. The Redeye became a rolling protest against restraint, a last defiant scream from Detroit's past. But it wasn't just about numbers. It was about attitude. The car's broad stance, the menacing hood scoop, the barely contained whine of the supercharger, all of it sent a message that this machine wasn't built for everyone. It was built for the few who still valued danger over digital perfection. Still, there were trade-offs. The Redeye's thirst for fuel was legendary. Its weight made it more of a blunt instrument than a scalpel, and its traction, or lack thereof, demanded respect from anyone who dared floor it. Yet those flaws became part of its charm. Driving a Hellcat Redeye wasn't about precision, it was about taming chaos. It reminded drivers that mastery takes more than software updates. It takes skill, patience, and a healthy dose of fear. Every decision behind its creation told a story about resistance. Dodge knew this era couldn't last forever, but if the brand was going to bow out of the muscle car arms race, it would do so in spectacular fashion. The Hellcat Redeye wasn't designed to save the planet. It was designed to save a feeling, a connection between driver and machine that modern cars were beginning to erase. It was loud, brash, and overbuilt in every possible way, yet that excess was precisely what made it beautiful. It existed in defiance of efficiency, a fossil-fueled monument to mechanical passion. And in doing so, it gave the Challenger nameplate something no electric car could replicate: an emotional signature, burned into memory by noise and motion. That was the genius behind Dodge's strategy. They weren't just selling performance, they were selling identity. But while the Redeye roared through the streets as a symbol of freedom, it was also a countdown clock. Regulations were closing in, rivals were pivoting toward electric innovation, and even loyal fans began to wonder how long a car like this could survive. As Dodge engineers pushed the limits of what the platform could handle, They knew the next chapter of performance would look, and sound, very different. What began as an act of rebellion was slowly becoming an elegy. And that's where the next part of the story unfolds, how the Hellcat Redeye faced the world around it, and what its rise revealed about the end of America's high-octane age. The Dodge Challenger Hellcat Redeye stood in the middle of a cultural and industrial storm, and that tension became its fuel. By the time the Redeye hit the streets, the automotive landscape had shifted beneath its tires. Rivals were embracing hybrid systems, talking about sustainability, and experimenting with silent speed. Dodge, on the other hand, doubled down on thunder. The Redeye became an avatar for every enthusiast who felt left behind by the march toward electrification. It wasn't about logic, it was about loyalty, and Dodge understood that perfectly. For the brand, this car wasn't just a halo model, it was a rallying cry. The Challenger, Hellcat Redeye, turned into a symbol of defiance that echoed far beyond Detroit. Critics called it excessive, even irresponsible, but that was the point. It was the American muscle ethos distilled to its purest form, built at a time when the rest of the world was whispering. On drag strips across the country, Redeyes battled for traction while drivers grinned through clouds of tire smoke. It was as if every burnout was a middle finger to an industry trying to move on. And yet, the more the Redeye resisted the future, the more it embodied it. Because what it really represented was choice. The freedom to experience speed in its rawest, least sanitized form before that option disappeared forever. The car's performance statistics became instant legends. 0 to 60 in the low 3s, a quarter mile in the 10s, a top speed north of 200 miles per hour. But what those numbers didn't show was how alive it felt. The Redeye wasn't merely fast, it was feral. Drivers talked about it like a living thing, unpredictable and thrilling, demanding focus with every throttle input. That kind of connection was disappearing in the digital age. Dodge's engineers seemed to know it, and they designed every aspect of the car to engage human reflexes instead of insulating them. Its traction control could be turned off with a button. Its 8-speed automatic shifted like it was daring you to keep up. And even its wide-body stance wasn't for aesthetics. It was there to claw back control from the avalanche of torque. The Redeye's relationship with its owners was symbiotic. It rewarded bravery but punished arrogance. It was honest that way. Beyond the specs, it also had personality. It wasn't sculpted by committees or tuned for polite conversation. It was raw, occasionally crude, but undeniably authentic. That authenticity struck a chord with buyers tired of cookie-cutter crossovers and algorithm-tuned steering. They wanted something with flaws, something that reminded them cars could still have character. The aftermarket world erupted around the Redeye almost immediately. Tuners found ways to extract more than 900, even 1,000 horsepower from the supercharged Hemi, and suddenly the car became a blank canvas for mechanical excess. Owners swapped pulleys, upgraded fuel systems, and turned their Redeyes into drag strip missiles that made exotic cars nervous. But it wasn't just about speed. It was about expression, about making something loud, unique, and unapologetically personal in a time when so many cars were software updates on wheels. For Dodge, the reception was both validation and pressure. The Redeye sold well, but it also raised expectations to impossible heights. How could they top this? How could they evolve without betraying the core that made the Challenger what it was? The answer wasn't simple. Regulatory walls were closing in, and even the most loyal fans had to admit that gasoline muscle couldn't last forever. The company's leadership began teasing an electrified future, promising that the spirit of cars like the Redeye would survive, even if the fuel source changed. That announcement hit enthusiasts like a gut punch. The Hellcat Redeye had become a benchmark, a tangible connection to America's mechanical past. And now it was being replaced by something silent. To many, it felt like the end of an era. But to others, it was proof that legacy could evolve. Because if the Redeye had taught anything, it was that passion doesn't die. It adapts. By defying the inevitable for as long as it did, the car had bought time for muscle culture to prepare for the next phase. Even as Dodge's electric prototypes began to surface, fans lined up for the last production years of the Redeye, eager to own a piece of the final chapter. Dealerships saw markups soar, collectors treated unsold models like relics, and YouTube channels filled with tributes that felt more like eulogies than reviews. The Hellcat Redeye became more than a car. It became a symbol of resistance against conformity, a rolling time capsule of internal combustion's most unrestrained expression. And as that symbolism deepened, it transformed from a mere product into a myth. But myths don't end when production stops. They evolve with the people who keep them alive. The story of the Redeye doesn't fade when the assembly line goes silent. It reverberates through every garage, every burnout, every weekend drag meet. The next part of this story isn't about speed alone, it's about legacy, and what the Hellcat Redeye means now that the engines have finally cooled. The Dodge Challenger Hellcat Redeye may have left the factory floor, but its pulse still lingers in every corner of American car culture. The moment Dodge announced the Redeye's retirement, enthusiasts realized they weren't just losing a car, they were losing an identity. The Redeye represented something primal, a fusion of excess and engineering that modern cars no longer dared to chase. With 797 horsepower under its hood and a demeanor that bordered on feral, it embodied the idea that emotion could outweigh logic, that noise could still be a language worth speaking. Even today, the Challenger Hellcat Redeye is discussed like a legend that refuses to die. On forums, in meetups, and in online auctions, it's revered as the final form of the classic muscle car blueprint. Collectors treat low-mileage examples like blue-chip investments, while everyday owners still take pride in rumbling down the street with a sound that can't be replicated by speakers or synthesizers. The Redeye's legacy isn't just about speed, it's about feeling. In a world of silence and sensors, it reminded people what mechanical connection really meant. When you drove one, you weren't just piloting a car, you were participating in a ritual. There was no pretense of efficiency, no moral justification for its appetite for fuel. It existed purely to thrill, and that honesty made it timeless. Yet its departure forces an uncomfortable question. What happens when the machines that shaped our passion can no longer exist? Dodge insists that the future of muscle will live on through electrification, with instant torque replacing displacement and battery packs standing in for fuel tanks. But even as the brand looks forward, the Redeye remains the emotional high watermark of what muscle cars used to be. Its presence was intoxicating, its imperfection endearing. Every time the Supercharger whined, it sang a hymn for the internal combustion era. And while the new generation of electric muscle promises staggering acceleration, it may never replicate the visceral, chaotic symphony that made the Redeye unforgettable. The Challenger Hellcat Redeye stands as both a monument and a mirror. It shows us what American automaking once celebrated: audacity, sound, and spectacle, and what it's learning to let go of. It also challenges us to reconsider what performance means. Does it have to be loud to be powerful? Does it have to burn fuel to be exciting? Those questions define the bridge between eras, and the Redeye sits squarely at its center, roaring in protest as it fades into history. But perhaps that's the point. Every generation needs a symbol to mark its turning point, and the Hellcat Redeye is exactly that. It closed the book on the age of gasoline glory and opened a new chapter where emotion and innovation must coexist. The next time someone hears the faint growl of a V8 on a distant highway, they won't just hear nostalgia. They'll hear the echo of a revolution that refused to go quietly. Because even when the batteries hum and the screens glow, the legend of the Hellcat Redeye will still remind us what it felt like when power came from fire. And that echo, in its own way, ensures that the spirit of the Challenger lives on, not in silence, but in memory, where it will forever run wide open. For American enthusiasts, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat Redeye represents more than horsepower. It's a final handshake between the past and the present. It's the kind of car that could never be built again under today's regulations, which makes its existence all the more remarkable. For US buyers, owning one now means owning a piece of history that's still usable on real roads. Prices have already begun to climb as production ends, with clean, low-mileage Redeyes commanding premiums from collectors who see them as future blue-chip classics. Yet the beauty of this car isn't just in its value, it's in its presence. Even parked, the Challenger Hellcat Redeye looks alive. Its wide body stance, hood scoop, and air intake seem to breathe in anticipation. Maintenance isn't cheap, but it's straightforward compared to exotic machinery. The Supercharged Hemi demands quality fuel and care, but it rewards owners with reliability that's surprisingly solid for something so extreme. Its real-world usability sets it apart from other high-horsepower cars. It can cruise comfortably one moment, then unleash chaos the next. That duality is what made it so beloved. For many, it's not just about speed, it's about identity. In an era where cars are increasingly defined by algorithms and range estimates, the Redeye remains defiantly human. You can feel its heartbeat through the steering wheel, sense its character in the way it idles slightly unevenly, and appreciate its honesty in how it never hides its appetite. As the electric transition accelerates, the Redeye's legacy will only grow stronger. It captures a chapter of American automotive culture that future generations may study the way we now look back on steam engines, an era when brute force was celebrated, not constrained. For younger enthusiasts entering the scene, the Redeye serves as a reference point, a reminder that passion and progress can coexist if we remember where we came from. It also hints at what's next. Dodge's upcoming electric muscle cars promise to channel the same attitude through new technology, and while the soundtrack will change, the mission remains: to make power exciting again. But the Redeye's message goes deeper than performance. It's about authenticity. It teaches that cars can be expressions of emotion, rebellion, and individuality, not just transportation or tech showcases. And that's why its story matters now more than ever. The Challenger Hellcat. Redeye may be gone from showrooms, but it will never disappear from the American imagination. It stands as a monument to an age when engineers chased excitement without apology, when brands dared to be outrageous, and when drivers wanted more than quiet perfection. Someday, when electric performance becomes the norm and silence replaces sound, enthusiasts will look back on the Redeye and smile, remembering the thunder, the drama, and the feeling of absolute freedom that only gasoline and grit could create. In a world racing toward the future, it remains the definitive reminder of where the heart of muscle truly beats. Because long after the engines stop, the spirit of the Dodge Challenger Hellcat Redeye will keep on roaring, in memory, in passion, and in the endless pursuit of power that defines the American dream.